Okay, so a nice and easy start. As always, give yourself a few moments to settle into your body. Have a think about your posture. Just bring in anything that feels experienced, if you have any, has offered you that is useful at this point. Feet should be hip width apart. Try and have your weight a little bit forward and just soften a little bit in your your knees. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths if that helps. Really, whatever means you have to bring your attention into your body very gently, so you're aware of what's going on, and so you start to get that more settled feeling in your attention, and then focusing on this area of the body between your hips and your waist. Just begin to move slowly. Try and have a sense of how much space there is, particularly in the center of your body, for movement. And we want to just let the movement fill that space, and then there'll be a gradual sort of expansion of that space through the movement itself. You start to lose some of the tightness, stiffness in the body. When we turn in the center of our body, we really reach every other part of the body. You may notice a slight change in the feelings in your legs. Quite often, if I come a bit closer, knees will move like this. We want to try and reduce that movement. We don't really want to keep twisting our knees around. Ideally, they don't move at all, but there's often just a little bit of movement. And then from the center of the body, we can feel the movement going up, of course, into our ribs, to our shoulders, finally reaching arms and hands. Be aware of the area between hips and ribs. There's a lot of sort of muscles, particularly in your back and sides, that are beginning to work. They're quite big, some of those muscles, so when they contract and expand, they do require a lot of space. And one of the things that we're trying to cultivate in Tai Chi and Qigong is an ability to move without actually straining against our own bodies. So we don't want those muscles to sort of rub against each other, as it were, or to restrict each other's space. So there's a general trend, a general direction in which we're trying to release tightness, to relax in a way, in big muscles that we habitually use, and perhaps overuse. And that's a gradual process, because you can't just stop a muscle working and expect to be able to still stand up or move. But what happens is other parts of the body, skeletal muscle, tendon, ligament, fascia, begin to engage more. And eventually, these smaller movements link up through our bodies, so that we get an understanding, a feel for one of the phrases in the old writings in Tai Chi, that when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. Now, this will take us into a sense of total movement through our body. And that in its turn leads us to this awareness that the connection isn't a purely, if you like, mechanical connection, but it's to do with the movement itself. Like a river flowing downstream will essentially connect to two parts of the riverbank, or a town higher up, the town lower down, and so on and so forth. So there's a connecting principle, a momentum. You like to think of it like that, an energy. And that too becomes a focal point for us. And it's often these smaller movements and these energetic movements that are the most likely to be affected by our minds. And so we can bring a degree of intentionality into the movements. Some of those intentionalities are unconscious, of course. It's argued sometimes that everything that we do has some kind of intention behind it. But others can start off at least with a very conscious intention. So, for instance, I mentioned earlier, weight slightly forwards, hips dropping back. There's an intention to allow gravity to work through your body, particularly in this area of lower back, hips, buttocks, to not resist. And that's quite difficult. You may find yourself just sort of dropping back a little bit and then suddenly tightening up. So it requires, if you like, a direct intervention. And we do that through this aspect of intention. And that could be an intention to feel a particular thing, have an image. I sometimes describe the feeling in the hips and buttocks as though you're just overhanging slightly. Imagine sitting on a fence. If you sit on the top of a fence, you'll tend to sort of let your hips drop back. Of course, on a fence, we would probably lean forward slightly. We don't. Another image we might use is to imagine the pelvis being a bit like a bucket in a well, just hanging down. It might be, for those of you with previous experience, just a memory of how this feels in your legs, your belly, in the hips and lower back. To recall that memory, to recall a sensation in the same way that we might look at a photograph of ourselves with a group of friends and smile, because that's a kind of response to a memory of a happy time, and so on and so forth. It might be an awareness of detail, more kind of like, if you like, intellectual aspect, that when our weight is forward and our hips drop back, knees are in line with the boards of our feet. We can look down and just check that. Our hips are more in line with our ankles. It's a bit more difficult to check that. So there are many ways that we bring body, mind, and movement, energy together. And just as we want that sense of physical harmony between the muscles that I mentioned earlier, so those three elements begin to interact. It's not that one is inherently more important than another, and which we use at any particular time, where the emphasis is down to what's happening for us at this particular time. So these early exercises are very simple. Once you've done them a few times, you should be able to do them without having to think too much about the technique of the exercise. And it gives you a chance for that reflection and gathering of your attention as the starting point for what happens next. They also have a very gentle aerobic quality to them, and they help to get our blood circulating into areas of the body where maybe, especially if you're watching this live in the morning, you may be a bit stiff the night before sleeping. So there's many useful attributes to these initial swinging exercises. One of the features for me is that sense of rhythm comes through, and this is something that, like the sense of connection that I was talking about, is sometimes a bit more obvious when we're moving quickly. So it gives us an idea of what we're looking for in some of the later exercises. Now just turn your hands palm out, raise them up a little bit. And hands are slightly in front of your shoulders. Palms facing upwards, elbows hanging down below your hands. Don't have your hands too high. A little bit more open across your chest. And then just let your hands drop. So again, come a bit closer to the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Just pull your shoulders up a little bit, not too far, and then let them drop. Do that a few times. Notice what's happening in your chest and your shoulder blades. And notice that your shoulders will drop into the rib cage, so it feels. So we can begin to have a sense of confidence that our arms aren't going to drop off, and that there's still a shape there given by that structure naturally within the body. And then try the same thing very carefully with your hips and knees. Just push up a little bit, maybe just come up on your heels if that's comfortable for you, and drop down. And again, there's this sense of dropping into something. Obviously, you're dropping into the ground, and your upper body's dropping into your legs. You may also notice again what's happening in your shoulders. But again, there's the structure, the strength within our body that continues to support us without the tightness, without the stiffness in the muscles. Now, just slow that down a little bit so that you get the same sort of sensation, but not as dramatically. I'll push up, the heels come slightly off the ground here, and then this time I'm not going to push my heels up. I'm going to keep them on the ground, but my weight a little bit forwards, and looking for that feeling that we call letting go or releasing, softening in those same areas, so that we start to be able to dissolve away the resistance to the pull of gravity through the body, and our center of gravity begins to sink down. And this is the process of rooting down. It starts with that intention to release. You can imagine the feeling that you just had, perhaps working in maybe your lower back or wherever seems appropriate, and just feel yourself dropping down. And then eventually, of course, you'll reach a point where your legs just quite naturally push you up. So your body grows out of the ground and contracts back into expanding and contracting. Don't try and work to any particular breathing pattern, but you may find that your breath naturally slips into that rhythm of expansion and contraction. Now bring your arms around in front of you and push up and let the expansion push your elbows out. Turn over, releasing your hips and your shoulders, and press it down. So you're pressing the ball down. Pushing up. Try not to lose that awareness of what's happening in the hips and your lower back. Don't let your arms fill the whole of your attention. The arms will follow the movement. Hands are quite close to your body, not out there somewhere. This exercise is called rooting down. Rooting down is both the first physical principle, in a sense you could call it, of actually lowering your center of gravity, allowing your center of gravity to drop through the ground, ideally. And that gives us a much more stable posture, but one where we're less likely again to stiffen up. So when I mentioned earlier that we want to try and just release, to soften, to relax in those big muscles in our, for instance, our back and shoulders, various things help us with that, a growing awareness of that inner structure that continues to support us without the stiffness. And also just the physical act of allowing your weight to drop takes some of the burden off those muscles. The other thing about the rooting down is that it initiates a cycle of movement of energy downwards through your body, followed by an upward expanding energy. Almost like you're in water and you're dropping down into the water, and then you feel the buoyancy of the water pushing you up. And that image of moving through water is one that is a constant image in all of these movements, one of the most common images that we use. Just aware of a slight sense of resistance, more than the air around you would normally offer. And in water, our instinct usually is to not strain, not to stiffen up. We sort of know that if we do that, the resistance increases significantly. And so the image of moving through water offers us the possibility of the style of the movement, this relaxed, smooth, flowing style, but one which has a certain amount of strength developing. Sometimes we say we move like water as well, and I mentioned that earlier, talking about that sense of the movement, the energy flowing through the whole of our body. Now this time, turn your hands palm out, push up. This is the movement called the wild goose. So with this one, we have this image of the bird in flight. So when we're offered an image in Tai Chi, we're offered it so that we can bring some of the qualities that that image evokes into the movement. If an image doesn't resonate with you, don't focus on it too much. Don't chase after it. It may come to mean something later. And it may be that some images, for those of you with more experience, that were meaningful a year ago or whatever, lose their effect. These things are constantly changing. So try not to get distracted by the images, but rather observe how they influence your movement. How they influence not just the movement, but your awareness, your intention. And then your hands drop down, pushing in front of your belly, pushing up. This is called parting the clouds. It's lovely sort of opening, expansive quality. I don't know what it's like where you are as you watch this around here in Cambridge at the moment. Very dark grey skies. If the sun were to come out, you would get that sort of opening quality. Hopefully that would happen at some point. Still using your legs, your hips, the dropping of your weight and the expansion from the ground. So the connection to the ground is key in Tai Chi. It's one of the places that we draw energy into our body from, one of the most important places. Do one more of these. Then I'm going to go back to the first of these exercises and do them in a little sequence. So rooting down, take your time if you are following this, and give yourself time to feel the change from one movement to another. If you do get it out of order, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it's good to have the discipline of trying to be as clear and precise as possible about these movements. That increases the effectiveness of that mind-body connection. And you can begin to notice as you move from one movement to another, subtle changes in the upper part of your body. And we've discovered that every exercise, in fact, every part of it, every exercise has its own distinct resonances, patterns of movement within our body, different parts of the body affected to a greater or lesser degree. And that too feeds into our intention. So we can begin to sort of target, in a way, movement within the body, the flow of the energy. And again, those of you with more experience, if there's a particular part of the body, if you've got a stiff back or a tight shoulder, you'll get to know the exercises that work best for you to release those energies. And again, it increases the ability to focus quite deeply into our body. With that goes a greater sense of stillness, calmness. So again, body, mind, and energy, the three treasures of Tai Chi Chuan, interacting and supporting each other. Do one more round of this. This is a very simple sequence. Some sequences in Tai Chi, of course, are quite complex. That they can all serve in the same way. This time, as you sink down, let your hands drop down. Sides, feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders, pushing up. Just a little above your head, wind your arm around as though you're plucking something off a tree, and then draw down. Transfer your attention to the other side, feel the extension upwards, almost like you're stretching out a big elastic band, feeling that extension all the way through that side of your body. It's called Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. Still trying to maintain that deep inner focusing as you do this. But you'll find almost certainly if you're like me, that will easily get lost. But we begin to notice as a feature of all of these movements, which is that there's two sides to them. They extend out, yang, and they draw in, yin. So ideally, I suppose, we would maintain that feeling of, or that awareness of the feelings within the body, that deep focusing. As I just said, in practice, we often lose that. But we begin to realize that the movements seem almost as though they've been designed to bring our attention back. So we can just begin to get a sense of, as it were, touching base. And quite an apt description of the routine there. One more time on each side. Let your hips drop back a little bit and swinging your arms around, just any tightness built up in your shoulders or your back. Just let that release. And slowly talk. Shake out. So our minds are an active part of these movements. Body, mind, and energy together. And sometimes I think it's better to approach Tai Chi and Qigong as moving meditations rather than exercise. Obviously, it is exercise, But the significance of the mind is there's not mind over matter, and it's not as simple as just thinking the right thoughts. We know that there's other factors as well. There's these three elements that we want to bring together, but we try not to drift off into the ether. We can reach out. We reach out and touch the environment around us in various ways. Just as a tree growing up from its root, its branches spread out, but we don't want to lose the connection to the root. The next couple of exercises don't involve an actual dropping down and pushing up, but we do want to maintain this sense of just dropping slightly. You can see my slight curve in my knees, again, that sense of an overhang in hips, so that we're still allowing, without restriction, that pull of gravity through our body. It's not going to go away. And we find a way of aligning to it to allow it free passage, like a drain pipe on the side of a house. Unlike the drain pipe on the side of a house, we get from that movement upwards. So with that very much in mind, just come into that position, bring your hands to your sides, to the center of the body. Bring your hands in front slightly, press up just a little bit, and notice the feeling in your back, and then push out to the sides. Hands are slightly in front of your body, and again notice this, the sensations in your back as you do this, and then without losing those, turn a little bit in your hips, turn back to the front, bring your hands in. Do the same thing to the other side, noticing that when we move in the center, we actually again affect the whole body, including the directions of the arms and back. And as you bring your hands in here, it draws your attention to your center. And again, we get that feeling of releasing, just reinforces the sense of the root and the center of our body dropping into the root. And then the final part of this exercise is to push out sideways. And again, coming back to the center. So it's the center that we want to drop towards the ground. And we begin to focus strongly through the center to direct the various movements of the body. So this is called pushing in 4 directions. Starting again, pushing up or flowing this time, and down, bringing your attention back into your center, feel your hips releasing, connection to the ground. Turn and push out, and again, back to the center. And then in the other direction, notice which way is easier to turn, perhaps, if that's the case. And then facing forwards and pushing out. So you're moving through water, just becoming aware again of the sensations, particularly in the upper part of your body. Sense of elasticity that builds in the soft tissue, so that as we extend, we sort of prime the body for the return. When we extend out, when we're aware of that elasticity, we want to make sure that we don't overdo it, we don't tighten up. So it's not simply a question of moving as far as you can. I want to feel here, for instance, we could have moved a little bit further, so there's still that space for the internal movement. Again, there's this bit of a rhythm there. It's quite difficult sometimes to notice that slower rhythm. It's a rhythm that our bodies will begin to resonate to, that our minds, and again, maybe our breathing, will begin to resonate too. And then letting your hands drop down again to their full length, and the next feeling of expansion, let that push your hand out. Draw your fingers back a little bit, as much as you can, without tightening your wrist, and bring your hand down the center line. Again, expansion not dissimilar to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky, for those of you familiar with that exercise. So again, be aware of focusing our intention. And then, if it's comfortable, add a little turn. So again, the turn, drawing your arm around a little bit. And then changing sides. It's called circling palms. And once again, if it's comfortable for you, the turn. One more time. And again, stand forward. Give your legs a shake. So we begin to say the significance of this center part of the body, and it's an important point of focus. I sometimes think of the center of the body as being like an old style telephone exchange, where you would dial into the exchange and your message would get transmitted out again, and then whoever you're phoning would come in and then out. I suppose these days a bit like an internet server. So it remains a key part of the movement, both in terms of the physical structure of the body, and we'll see how that works very clearly in a few moments, but also in terms of our intention. It's almost as though we focus through that area, like an instruction given to the center. The next exercise, as I said, will illustrate that. But most of what we do is done upright, but the next two movements use this ability of the center to connect to the rest of the body to give us a slightly different angle to our posture. If you just stand and tilt the pelvis, and if I put my hands on my pelvis, you perhaps see more easily. Tilt it forwards and then come back to the upright and tilt back. So when I do this, you see when my hips go back, my head goes forwards. When they go down, my head goes up. When I push them forwards, the head goes back. And when I go forwards, there's a gentle extension through my back and then through the front of the body. And we can even consider that what draws our hips back here and here is actually the pull of gravity. So this is an interesting aspect of our posture, that the pull of gravity actually helps us come into an upright stance when we cease resisting it. So we're going to do two exercises from this. They're nice and easy because they're both quite strong. I'll be doing them quite big, so you can hopefully see what I'm doing, but do them to whatever level is useful to you. Sink down in the way that we did before. You see stronger movement. Push up, let your arms follow. And at this point, sink down again, but push your hips back. Let your arms follow the movements. It's called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. The hips drop back, come to the upright position and the side. You see, I'm not trying to pull myself up with my neck or my shoulders, but rather to get the hips to drop back and the sensation of head floating up slightly. And remember, you have that inner support system, that area of skeleton. So at this point, you can give yourself a moment just to let everything drop down again before you push up. Very carefully with your knees and your back. Don't be in a hurry. Burn a boat. One more time. This time, as you come to the upright position, let your hands rest in front of your belly, palm down. Turn horizontally and then push your hips back. That pushes your hands forward. Turn again, swinging your hips across. I'm exaggerating, remember, come back to the upright position. Do the same thing in the other direction. This is called polishing the table. So you can see what my hips are doing. I'm going to turn around here. I turn, see how the hips push back, and then move across and come back to the original position. Think about how you're coming to that upright position. Here, don't strain in your neck, but let this area of the body just drop down as though you're sitting into a high chair. So the flow of the movement, and in particular the flow of the arms, which is often the first thing we notice about Tai Chi, is that an outcome of moving correctly, moving from the center of the body, less strain in our back and our shoulders, concerned with sort of holding us up and creating movement, will mean that the energy will flow more freely and the fluidity of the movement will gradually build. One more time. Good, and shake it. Lovely. We're going to change the stance. So here, feet are hip width apart. If you imagine parallel lines going through your feet across the floor, turn one foot out and just be prepared to play around with that. Step straight forward on its line with the other foot. You can still see the background between my legs there. So I've maintained the hip width stance. If I stand like that, it'll be like trying to balance on a log. And about the same in length as width, maybe a little bit longer as you've managed to sink your hips a little bit. And begin to move your weight forwards and backwards. This too is an outcome of the rooting down. So rather than just forwards and backwards, when you say getting into your back foot, look again for that releasing, softening feeling, particularly around hips, buttocks, knees. Just feel that connection to the floor and how you get pushed from the ground. Just as we did earlier when we were being pushed up, but this time the intention is for that push to move you into the other leg. And it's in the end, it's just a split second, but there's nothing wrong with just resting in one leg for a moment. And the transfer of the weight is another key aspect of Tai Chi. And again, to quote one of the old writings, the Tai Chi lineage, the movement, it said, is rooted in the feet with this lowering of our center of gravity and the response to that in various ways. That response is transmitted through the legs. The movement is directed, shaped through the center of the body, as we've seen. So you want to, for instance, maintain that feeling of your hips dropping back a little bit to counteract the tendency we may have to lean forwards and backwards. This is much more stable movement, so this is an important exercise, but from that point of view. And then finally, the movement is expressed with the upper body and in particular arms and hands. Rooted in the feet, transmitted through the legs, directed through the center, and expressed in arms. Next time you go into your front leg, push your back knee forwards. Feel how the hip drops a little bit when you do that. More of your weight begins to settle in the front leg. Put the heel down, and then when you go back, raise the toes again. The hip can drop a little bit. So we gradually find ourselves being able to rest more and more of the weight through one leg. Remember the significance of the pelvis, try not to tilt. So if the pelvis and the hips are level, more likely we're going to remain upright. And so we can begin to feel a sense of stability over each leg. And that means we can then, I'll turn my foot out slightly, front foot out slightly, and bring my foot in, my back foot in. I push back and out to the side, put the ball of the foot down, lower your heel, gently press in, plant the foot, and then go back. Raise the toes, same thing here, except that your heel goes down. The planting aspect of it is a bit like, literally, if you were planting something in your garden, dig a hole, plant in, cover it with earth, and then just gently press the earth down. And it's that gentle push down that is what we mean by planting. So you just, again, clear and sure on your connection to the ground. And it's one of the reasons we take a slightly shorter step than normal, so that we're able to do that. If I took a longer step, I would fall back a little. But all of these ideas are transferable into our everyday walking. But this is the way that we cultivate them. And on the other side, step through. So I suppose going back to the horticultural aspect, what we're doing here is almost like we're planting the seedlings in a greenhouse, in a controlled environment, so that certain qualities that develop and they can then be moved outside. This isn't meant to be exactly like ordinary walking, but it's a very, very good exercise for our general mobility and stability. And it's an important exercise in the Tai Chi system because of the energy that it generates. Beginning to raise toes and heel. So the requirement in the mind is to become a little bit more focused, a little bit more deeply concerned with things like that contact with the ground, with the alignment of particularly the center of the body, with the flow of the movement. If you get distracted at this point, you might find that you wobble a little bit. But once again, each time our weight arrives in one leg is an opportunity to recenter, to refocus. And then stepping in, swings out back to hip width. So it traces a little kind of quarter of a circle. And that's quite a natural thing, because here, if I just pick my leg up, it would tend to fall in underneath my hip. And we're going to take this into taking a few steps. So in whichever direction you have the space, I'm going to go forwards, of course. So I'll bring my foot in, I'll feel that circle, I just encourage the foot out to complete a half circle this time. And then find there's a little bit of movement in the center that helps that. Planting the foot, moving through. Take your time. Another thing about bringing your foot into the center is it gives you this moment of just settling. And there's nothing wrong at all. You'll see me do it sometimes. You can just put your toes down. If you're feeling you haven't quite got there, then correct that. And then going back. Well, I'm going back, changing direction if you haven't done so already. And bring the feet down. Good. Shake out. So we're going to use that movement of the weight, that sense of the energy generated to move the arms. And once again, we have to pay attention so that we don't lose the sense of what's happening and it just becomes an upper body movement. And one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion, your whole body is engaged. And this helps us to develop this sense of unity, of unification within the body and mind. To counteract that feeling we can have sometimes, put your keys down and you're all over the place. You can't. Everything feels very scattered. It's a unifying quality, makes a massive contribution towards our sense of well-being. Now, have your right foot forward so you can mirror my movements. First exercise is called fisherman cast a net. I move forwards, and if I were in water, as I explained earlier, my arms would be delayed slightly, and then they'd follow through. And then going back, again, following through. Gentle curve in the fingers, like a wave moving through the body. As before, just trying to be aware of patterns of expansion, contraction, flow of energy through your upper body. The more we bring our attention to those, the more our intention gets applied. So one of the progressions in Tai Chi is that the movements begin to be generated not from outside in the way that I've been describing, but increasingly from the inside out. Fisherman casting net. And we're just giving yourself a chance to settle in your leg each time. Don't be in a hurry. Slowing down. It comes with the attention to detail. It's also a very important part. There is a stillness within these movements. This time, when you go back, bring your hands in more in front of your hips, turn the palm forwards. Let the movement push your elbows forwards. You'll notice that your arms begin to curve up. It's like my hip is pushing my elbow forwards, my hand swings up. So don't try and lift your arms. It's called pushing wave or pushing a wave. So again, that's a slightly stronger, more focused feel than the previous exercise. If you're pushing against water, you would know not to stiffen up. That wave-like movement through the body, just give it that slightly stronger focus. This time, when you arrive in the front legs, settle down and turn a little bit to your left. So that separates your hands, just let them flatten out a little bit, a bit like the wild goose. As you bring your weight back, let your hands drop down, you curve down, and they begin to curve up, and you turn to your right. This is the movement, wind blows the willows. Again, rooted in the feet, transmitted through your legs, directed through the center of your body. Expanding, contracting, expanding. One more time. Good, and then just shake it. So let's do those movements on the other side. Turn your right foot out a little bit, step forwards, sink your weight back, settle into your back foot, and then feel the push forwards, fisherman casting. Try not to stiffen up in your fingers or your wrists. Your arms follow your shoulders until you settle into the leg, and it's only then that they'll swing past shoulders and hips. One more round. And then pushing waves, not stiffening up in your back or your shoulders or your arms. So don't bunch up to stiffen, but rather try and just cultivate that inner landscape that allows for that flow of movement, like water will flow through an external landscape. We encourage the flow into certain shapes. So particularly those of you who know the movements well, that you might have in your mind the shape of the movement in front of you, like just allow your body flow into it like plaster falling into a mold. More time. Go into the front leg, and as you settle in, turn in a little, wind blows towards. This time, when you go forwards and you turn again, push your back knee forwards. You may find that the hip moving helps you with this, bringing your foot in, or the foot forwards or back. So you do it the other way around if you, that's where the room is. Go forward, settle, bring the foot in, turn. So combining the previous movement with the step in. And what you may find that you're able to do here, if you've got the stability, you raise your knee and just rotate your hip. This is called dragonfly skin. If you find that in bringing your knee up, it's or you lose the stability, just do this instead. But if you can do, obviously, quite good if you can do that. But we need to keep hips and pelvis level if we're going to do this without wobbling around. I'm going to change direction now. Well, you may find, and again, it's probably for people more familiar with this, every now and then you go to do this, there's a little wobble, and so you can either put the foot down, of course, since you don't want to fall over, or maybe you can just release a little bit and actually find yourself settling in more. So it's possible to recover from this. Dragonfly skin. And that last exercise, if you do find that you're quite wobbly and you want to practice this releasing, do it next to a wall or a table, something you can hold on to. And then when you get to this position, you have the little wobble, you can say, oh, what happens here? You can play about with it without the fear of falling over. And you'll find that if you do that, gradually your body will we'll learn how to make the correction. But now, just rubbing your hands together and with the pads of your fingers, tap lightly over your face. This is another good exercise for bringing your attention into your body. And go over your head with the palms of your hands. Down to one shoulder, and then your arm. And on the other side. Put your hand around your back. Around your hips. And the outside of your legs, not the inside. Nice and light on your belly. Finally, the upper part of the chest. It's another little exercise that you can use as a warm-up, and not a bad thing to do in the morning. Again, it brings your attention into your body, helps to just loosen the body up and get the energy flowing. You can do it seated or standing if you're laying down, it's up to you. And you can do it in any order. I do it in a particular order, but that is significant. Now come back to this parallel stance, what we call the Wu Chi posture. I talked about this process of bringing your attention back. And this last exercise is called Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. So it's really focusing on that returning process that is so important for mind and body. You sink down and you push up, and this is the embracing the tiger bit. And it's sometimes said to just represent our daily busy lives. And then we return to the mountain. So something to perhaps take away with you is what it is that brings you back. For me, the mountain is a lovely image of the qualities of Tai Chi, the stillness, the strength, the spaciousness, dynamic quality. And for me, pretty encapsulated by that image, but it might be something different for you. It could be a physical sensation, different image. But just ask yourself as you do this, what would be most useful to you later in the day when you're feeling a bit frazzled or tired? You feel as though your body's not quite in tune, and so on and so forth. What would be most helpful to you? One more time. And stay. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll do my best to answer them. But enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming.